Okay, I want to call to order the Board of Ed meeting. Actually, we want to re-enter the Board of Ed meeting. We called to order earlier for December 6th, 2021. We've got a lot of good stuff on the agenda tonight. Want to kick off with your announcements and then we'll come back. Pass the meeting over to Dr. Kersey for some district announcements.
And I appreciate everyone's patience as posted. Board was in an executive session and very thorough, and I appreciate everyone's patience here in the community. What we do at each of these meetings is I open up with some district highlights. 5 of the items, in deference to time, I will sprint verbally. 5 of the items are truly good news. 2 relate to sort of future issues that we have to grapple with, and the last is some important COVID-19 updates. First off, the Hastings High School Yiddish Club held their first ever Hanukkah celebration last week, teaching the meaning and importance of the holiday to club members of all faiths. So I think it was, I've been in some classes, as my notes show, and some of the world history classes have been dealing with world religions. So this was the students themselves from within the Yiddish Club doing that work. Second, the Farragut Middle School Sensory Room is now open to all students. I didn't say staff, maybe the staff can work on that, Farragut leadership, but we thank the Hastings Education Foundation for making that possible. Third, the Hastings High School Student Union is holding a talent show, I think it's this Friday, if my dates are right, thanks, in conjunction with the Hastings Police Department with prizes from local businesses. So once again, this High School Student Union is showing they're real path breakers here, and I really appreciate their attention to healthy activity. Fourth, as we've talked about now for a while, but there's actually a mock-up, the 5th year celebration of the Class B state champion boys varsity soccer team is now going to be real. It might even not be there, but they're posted on the website with the agenda is the mock-up of what will be a gorgeous, gorgeous tribute to that side, to use football talk, soccer, sorry. But it's a great, great celebration. And thank you to the mayor, thank you to the village leadership for moving that along. And now let me jump to a topic that, per Westchester County District Attorney, all of the districts in the county are being asked on December 14th to send a statement out to all families about gun safety. I have stayed silent since the tragedy in Michigan. Superintendents these days all too often have to be involved in guiding districts even far away from such tragedies. And the mode now is as strongly agreed to is you make sure we're safe here, and we are safe. Lou and I are joined at the hip on this. Jennifer and I are joined at the hip. Board is, as you're right, and it's publicly posted, scheduled a while ago, please hear me, scheduled a while ago on December 20th, but it was scheduled several months ago, is an executive session for you on security. But what the district attorney in the county is asking is that all superintendents send a note to all families around the issues of gun safety. So that'll be out. Now to a lighter topic, weather. There's a little snow coming Wednesday. Don't worry, we'll still have school. It's not enough for anything to worry about other than a superintendent getting a scare when I open up an email today. But we know how to handle weather, and we will be fine. Now let me shift quickly to COVID-19. You may hear from George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, that he will declare a state of emergency. That is solely, that's what he told a group of us this morning. That is solely, so later, he has the ability, if need be, to move quickly on certain actions. Many counties in the state are taking this move. As you may know, the governor took this move statewide, and it simply is a way to give him, as county executive, the flexibility to make some decisions. We're in a far, far better place than we were a year ago at this time. Our rates are up. We are seeing that within the district some, more so than we'd like. But as I said in my Friday note, we know what to do here. We know how to handle these matters. Vaccinations matter, masking matters, Physical distancing matters. Staying home if you're not well matters. All of those pieces. We still, though, have had an uptick in infections. And fortunately, we're finding that hospitalizations are down. So those who are vaccinated, that you will be healthy. We just have to monitor these things carefully. Because our numbers are up, Maureen's been working with the nursing staff here that if the county lets us, please hear, if the county lets us, we will institute the Test to Stay program. We have 18 students on quarantine now. Board may have noticed I was suddenly on my phone because we have another exposure at Hillside, so we unfortunately are going to have some more students out on quarantine. That's just the nature of it right now. That population is still unvaccinated. We had an exposure in the high school, but no quarantines resulted, 0. And that's solely because of vaccinations. We'll soon be there for our Hillside population. But in the meantime, as the rates have ticked up, that means our exposures and our quarantines will tick up. But we want to see if we can handle it. We don't have to go into the details tonight, Maureen. But we're looking into running Test to Stay earlier than January. And a few other districts are joining us in that if, and I'm sorry I have to say this, if the county allows us. That's what we're waiting on. Also, we've given flexibility on the length of quarantine, saying you could test out and test back in at 7 days if you are negative with a PCR at day 5 and asymptomatic. We still on that, we're also waiting for approval from the county. The state has said on both of those, yes, Test to Stay and the reduced quarantine, we're waiting for the county to say yes on that. Lastly, the vaccination clinics, we know that will go well for us. I'm not sure the exact number right now, Maureen, but we know a lot of our families. 47. So we know of the 550 who about 8 weeks ago told us they would avail themselves of that. We know that many of those students through their families have gone out for vaccinations. So that's a sprint through a set of very important updates. And we're very much hoping the county will give us permission to proceed with the Test to Stay, and also with that, we're going to stay with the reduced quarantine length as long as we can. So those are my updates at this point.
Great,
Thank you.
okay, I want to get into some reports from other administrators. Before we do that, I know we've got Dr. Ken Catrone is here, and he has his candidacy for an assistant principal role up, and wanted an opportunity for us to put that to the head of the agenda in case, since you are physically here, thank you for being physically here. And let me just pull up, where's the actual, where are we, 8A, right? Okay.
If you want to say
yeah.
something.
Ms. Borelli, would you like to say a few words?
Is there a seat from here?
No, if you could come up and find a microphone somewhere, let's see.
Thank you. No worries, there we go. So just wanted to share how thrilled I am to have Dr. Catrone join the FMS administrative team. I will say that getting to know him these past few months as our ELA 7th and 8th grade teacher, he's really well received by his colleagues, by students. He's known to be very passionate, very energetic, and really dedicated and focused on building his relationships with parents and students. Some parents were even telling me later on that when during parent-teacher conferences, a few months back, that even he was talking about how those students were behaving and enjoying and interacting at recess, which I thought that was really wonderful. I mean, how great for your ELA teacher even to share and know your students so well to make those comments. Just his administrative experience, his work previously at Byram Hills and Soundview Preparatory School really made Dr. Catrone stand out to us as the next candidate, the best candidate for assistant principalship. And I'm really looking forward to having him join the team, and his experience really just is the number one, most important reason. And I'm really looking to have him lead our school and our students, and just welcome him. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may add quickly, I really want to thank, if I may use first names, Ken, for so quickly putting your name in the ring on this one. As I've shared with a few people, but for me, a few steps into the building, you found me and started chatting with me about, who you are. So I wasn't surprised with how quickly you chose to, pursue this. Through the interview process, along with other people, but with me, powerful, it's clear that we are getting a proven administrator, a proven educator, someone in a brief time. You've already shown your deep commitment to Farragut in this district. So my commitment, if the board votes you in, is to make sure you're here a while. And lastly, HAA stepped up to say they care and they want you to stay here as well. So there's going to be a whole group making sure that all those talents stay in Hastings for a good while.
Thank you. So I just want to acknowledge, I see that your dissertation was titled "The Heart of the Matter, the Relationship Between Stress and Anxiety in the High-Performing High School Culture," which is, I think,
Jermaine.
very germane to a lot of schools, us included. I know it's very similar to a lot of the work you've been thinking about, Lou. Great background, I'm sure, to go along with all of your other educational background. So appreciate that. Do I have a motion to approve the appointment?
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, welcome. You don't have to, but would you like to say anything briefly?
I'm just going to say that I'm so happy to be here, and since I started here last fall, I feel always very welcome, respected. I feel like I've already gotten to know many of the stakeholders, especially the kids and their parents, and I feel at home here. And I want to thank you all very much for this opportunity, and I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you.
Dr. Catron, if I could just say that I was tempted to vote no to this appointment because Eliana loves you. And I'm so disappointed that you're not going to be her teacher, but I'm thrilled that you're going to be part of our school still, so.
That's what's important to me, that I'm not going anywhere.
No, thanks. You're an amazing teacher, and
Yeah.
she loves you, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So let's go back to the top of the, looks like we have, probably because Melissa, you are, thank you. You've got a lot on the agenda later, Melissa. I think you're not up to the administrative reports. We'll pass the meeting to Maureen for business official reports.
Sure. You can hear me, I don't need to mic, do I?
No.
Well, the people at home need you.
Okay. So I just have two very quick items tonight. The first one, in terms of on the finance side, we are going to be advertising a Budget 101. The first one will be January 12th in preparation for our budget season. And for those on the board that are familiar with it, it really just is, right now we're going to put one session, and then if we feel there's a need or there's a desire to have follow-ups based upon the amount of people that are interested in attending, I think it's helpful as we lead into the budget season because it sort of helps people understand how the budget is built and some factors that go into it. So we'll be sending something out shortly just so people have it on their calendars. And then the next item tonight, I just have a couple pictures to share with you of Hillside. And again, these I think we're enjoying kind of seeing as we're getting close to the completion of that building. So the first photo there just really kind of shows you the side there and the exterior insulation going in. The front piece there is the curtain wall framing. Again, this part of the project has a good amount of glass, and there's a lot of details in particular that go into the facade of this building. The pergola that is going to be in front of that curtain wall, I believe, should be on site, if not this week, next week. So that we're getting like the big milestones now we're hitting. The next pictures here again are just again showing the workers here putting the construction, installing those front glass windows into the entrance. Again, this was one of those long lead time items, so as we hit those milestones and we're able to close up the building, we're extremely happy that we're continuing on schedule, considering, you know, a lot of districts have been having issues with supply chain. The third picture here, again, this is just showing you things where the other trades and some of the things that have been delivered on site and are in the process of being installed, boiler, finishing electrical feeds, the plumbing, the rough-ins, all of that. They are actually sheetrocking, so now we're starting to see like the interior of the building, and as the days go on, it'll start really looking the way it's going to look when it's completed. They're painting the exposed steel, electrical panels, and again, continuing to close up the building. Here's a couple just shots of, you know, kind of seeing some of the larger units coming into the site. You can see the crane unit. We've had a crane on site a few times as they're bringing in like rooftop units that are being mounted. So here we see the air conditioning units for Hillside, the rooftop being placed, as well as the unit ventilator deliveries, which is what brings fresh air into the spaces. I believe the elevator will be on site in the next few weeks. They were at like kind of the final stages of that installation as well. And again, for the final shot, again, we love these aerial drone shots, and it really gives us a really good sense of what Hillside's going to look like when it's completed. And I think one of the things that is amazing to me, and I know obviously it looks bigger from the drone shot, but the side of Hillside prior to this addition, I feel like it's become more usable space because of the way they re-sloped it. So where that was a real steep drop off, there's a good amount of space there now. You can really appreciate it when you're on the site. And as we've been speaking about, you know, once we're closer to the completion of the building, that's where we hope to put the gardens and outdoor classroom space. That'll kind of be right there alongside the building. So that is it for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Student report.
All right.
Dean.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. First, I'll start with something that Dr. McCursey mentioned in the district highlights. The talent show is this Friday in the auditorium at 7 p.m. The show will feature many different performers and guest judges. It will also have many exciting prizes, including a $100 gift card to Sakura Garden for the first
Nice.
place.
Wow.
Outstanding. The high school winter concert is next week on the 16th. The different ensembles will be featuring many complex and intricate pieces, including an adaptation of music from The Mandalorian, if anyone's sure what it is, and an arrangement of Toxic by Britney Spears. Yes. So, band and orchestra are doing additional sectional lessons along with their early morning rehearsals in preparation. Varsity boys basketball got their first win of the season this afternoon against Palisades Prep, and many students hope that the team can be as successful as it has been in recent years. Many students are also looking forward to the holidays and an extended break from school. The student union is coming up with ideas for a possible spirit week the week before break. Seniors who applied early decision and early action to various colleges are going to start receiving admissions decisions within the next few weeks and into January. Some seniors are also completing their final round of applications as the new year approaches. The student union is looking to implement a mask recycling program in the high school, led largely by sophomore Lucy Richard and senior Liam Shanley. The program is a way for students to dispose of their masks in a more environmentally friendly way. Senior class is starting their tea center this week, a stand that will be selling tea, coffee, hot chocolate, and cookies, and all proceeds go towards the senior prom that will be held at Harvest on Hudson in June. And I'd like to close tonight by congratulating Dr. Catrone on his appointment to middle school assistant principal. I had the pleasure of being one of his students last year for a few months, and it is very exciting to see the positive effect he has in this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, public comment. Seeing not too much. Okay, so let's move on to our curriculum presentations, starting off with social emotional learning. Pass it over to Melissa.
Very good. So we have two very robust presentations for you this evening, and they're actually closely connected as we are considering how to ensure a welcoming and affirming environment for all of our students. So Jeanette Coker, Director of School Counseling, and I are going to begin with the SEL presentation, and then Dr. Janice Mateo Toledo, Diversity Inclusion Coordinator, and I will follow with our presentation around DEI efforts. So I'd like to start here with a quote from someone I esteem very highly, Dr. Mark Brackett from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, who believes that there are no bad emotions. He states, "My message for everyone is the same, that if we can learn to identify, express, and harness our feelings, even the most challenging ones, we can choose these emotions to help us create positive, satisfying lives." And that is our why of this work. So tonight we're going to have 4 key areas of focus for our presentation. And these are the 4 areas, and Jeanette and I will plan to pause after each section so that we can respond to any questions that the board may have. All right, we'll begin with SEL 101. What is it and why is it important?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Let's make sure I can hear me. Okay. So, SEL, what do these 3 letters mean? It's the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, the skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage their emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. And this definition is really coming from the CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. So what are CASEL SEL frameworks? Essentially, if you look, it's like a little bit of a pie. So social emotional learning sits in the center. And the 5 pie pieces that connect are made up of 5 areas: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. The 4 key settings where students live and grow, which are the outer rims, are comprised of communities, families, and caregivers, schools, and classrooms. And essentially, those areas are broad, interrelated areas that support learning and development, key settings of partnerships that support each other, essentially, to support the competencies that students and adults need to achieve that are sitting in that pie center. So some of the SEL-related concepts, just as definitions, self-awareness, the ability to identify one's own emotions and their effect on behavior, and the ability to recognize one's own strengths and weaknesses. Self-management, the ability to regulate those emotions. Social awareness, the ability to take the perspective and empathize with others, include those from diverse backgrounds and cultures, understanding. Relationship skills, to establish healthy relationships, communicate, clearly listen, work, seek help when needed. And finally, making responsible decisions, the ability to make constructive choices and evaluate outcomes and consequences of those actions.
So we'll pause for a moment if there are any questions about SEL 101. Okay.
So we take a look at some of the programs that we have currently working here in Hastings, and just as a little precursor, we are always working to build, include, make better, pull in to all of the things that are going on across the schools. So if you take a look, each of the things of the SEL support systems that we have working through the schools are listed there. So at Hillside, Second Steps programs, which was implemented a few years ago, individual counseling, small group counseling. Our school counselor, Julianne Snyder, does many groups at the elementary school that encompass many areas. Classroom lessons built on monthly topics, social emotional check-ins by teachers on a daily basis, every grade. Assemblies, which are done based on the needs of the student body. Pushing over into Farragut Middle School, the Second Steps continues through the agency as Home and Careers and the health curriculum, with additional lessons, themed lessons through those particular areas. Again, individual counseling pushes through to each school, push into classrooms on lesson topics. Big life journal where students are journaling in some, Ms. Jocelyn Perez is working with some students in life journaling. So it's helping to build their self-efficacy, their positive thoughts, their self-awareness. The mindfulness curriculum, affirmations and connections through the Google Classrooms, assemblies, of course, courageous conversations, and facing history. Carrying over into the high school, re-implementing challenge success, as you've heard some presentations by the high school principal, individual counseling, push-in, family university, which is happening again this year in the spring, assemblies, freshman seminars that I started this year with the freshmen, peer leadership program Stay Strong, daily social emotional check-ins, various levels with different teachers, health class curriculums, and facing ourselves, the race, gender, and equity course that we have running.
We'll pause here for questions as well about our program.
I just have a brief question. I noticed at FMS that there's no reference to the ruler program. So is that one that we had done previously and then we stepped away from it and then we instead decided to proceed with Second Steps at the middle school as well?
That's a yes and a no. Some classes are still doing ruler, the Yellen, they still have the mood meters, so teachers are using some of those as check-ins. So I'm going to own that I didn't put that in there. So thank you for asking.
No,
that's
just a question. I just remembered
Yes,
that from, okay.
yes, yes.
So elements of that still remain? at the
Yes,
middle
that
school?
language is still alive in all of the classes. I mean, middle school is very steeped in that when we got, learned it and got into it, and so we continue to utilize.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So a month ago, we administered the Panorama Screener to students and throughout the district, K-12. And for students in grades K-2, teachers took this screener on behalf of the students, and that was because of their developmental age and the reading that was involved to take the screener. And students in grades 3 through 12 took a two-part survey. So the first part of the survey measured indicators related to student competency and well-being. And the second part of the survey measured indicators related to student supports and environment. And this was used as our diagnostic screener this year.
So in the K2, we looked at 4 areas for the little guys. The emotion regulation, which demonstrates attention and investment into school. The perspective talking, which is considering the perspectives and understanding it from a different view, a teacher's perspective of the situation. The social awareness, which demonstrates the ability to be considerate to others in the class, have empathy, respond to appropriate body language, and of course self-efficacy, the belief in their abilities as a student, their confidence levels. So results range from 62% to 79% favorable, with self-efficacy the main area for growth, and emotion regulation as the main area of strength. And this slide shows those graphs under each of those areas.
Sorry, what's self-efficacy again? Because there's the 5, there was the 5 points, and now these are different titles, so I'm a little confused.
Right, so self-efficacy is one of the indicators associated with social emotional wellness, and it's basically the belief, like I believe I can do it and therefore I do. It's the confidence in one's own ability as a learner, and it's their belief in their ability to achieve.
So in grades 3 to 5, the part 1 of that survey was a little more disaggregated. It measured self-management, which is how well students manage their emotions, their thoughts, and their behaviors in different situations. Positive feelings, pretty much what that sounds like. How frequently are they showing positive emotions? The self-efficacy, the belief in their academics and in their outcome, the belief in themselves to achieve. Challenging feelings, how frequently are students feeling challenging emotions? Prefaced with higher scores indicating less frequent challenging emotions. We had to pause and think about that when we looked at the data. Emotion regulation, how will students regulate their emotions, and supportive relationships. How supported do students feel through their relationship with friends, family, and adults at school? So the results basically showed the majority of students in these grades reported overall favorably in all areas, and our national percentile scores were strong, as you will see in the graph in the next slide, with reports of supported relations most notably at a very high percentile, 80th through 99th.
So here you can see, once the students start taking the survey, the blue is really indicative of Hastings, and then the green is the comparison to others nationally, like where we are with the percentile.
So part 2 for grades 3 to 5, as Melissa mentioned, measured supports in student environment. So teacher-student relationships. So perceptions of how strong the social connection is between teachers and students within and beyond the classroom. School climate, perceptions of the overall social and learning climate of the school. Sense of belonging, how much do students feel that they are valued members of the school community? And engagement, how attentive and invested students are in class. So here results show that the majority of students overall reported favorable in all areas, and our national percentile scores are strong with, again, student relationships most notably in the 60th to 79th percentile. Here's that graph.
So can I ask you, are you guys feeling good about 60 to 79th percentile, or like, were you hoping for the higher percentile, the 80 to 99th percentile, or is 60 to 79th considered good?
I think we're always hoping for higher in all areas, you know, as communities, parents, educators, teachers, we're always looking for a higher percentage in those areas. So it could be attributed to a number of different items, but I think 79th in that arena is still pretty average to high, considered as comparison nationally, in comparison to, I should say.
Is there a way to isolate when you see engagement only at 62%, what that is or why?
There is, and we have each of the questions, and I can pull it up as we're looking, but there's a section of the diagnostic screener that actually indicates like what specifically were the questions that were around engagement that students were responding to.
I have them if you want.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Go for
okay,
it.
so engagement, there were, hang on one just a second, let me just make sure I pulled them right. Yep, school engagement, here we go. Okay, all right. So how excited are you about going to your classes? In your classes, how eager are you to participate? How often do you get so focused on activities in your classes that you lose track of time? When you are not in school, how often do you talk about ideas from your classes? And finally, overall, how interested are you in those classes? And I will share just briefly, because you're going to see it in the 6 through 12. It's an interesting smattering where some percentages are lower, but the overall percentage of how interested are in your classes always resonated higher for all of the grade levels. So even though some of those questions are a little lower on the percentage, overall students wanted to be there. And we have a student here who can speak if I would never put you on the spot. Happy to be there, but you know, there are some challenges in the engagement area. Yeah. Okay. So looking at the 6 areas, the same 6 areas across the board for the 6 through 12 related to the competency. The responses were, make sure I'm on the right slide here. Yes, okay. They seem to have declined. So there's a decline from grades 3 to 5 in all areas from the 6 through 12 data, with a 12 to 16 percentage point decline in these 3 arenas. In the positive feelings, it was a 16% decline. In challenging feelings, a 12%, and in self-efficacy, 14% from the 3 to 5 results. Is that all right? Okay. There we go.
So here's where we're starting to see some concern, right? So when you're thinking of our data even comparatively, and you're looking at self-efficacy, so we have our eyes on that area too.
In part 2 of that, looking at those 4 other areas, there were favorable responses declined as compared to grades 3 to 5 in those areas, with declines of 15 to 33 percentage points. And all 4 student supports and environment indicators are areas of concerns, as Melissa just mentioned. And engagement is an area of the greatest concern, with results placing us near the 20th percentile compared to all schools in the national set data. But I will preface this by saying, when I looked at the survey that we did on school safety and school climate back in 2019, if you remember, we did report out on that. I looked at these particular areas, and these particular areas across the board for grades 6 through 12 all went up from 2019. So that was an interesting, for school climate, it went from 47% to 55%. For the teacher-student relationships, 47 to 55. For sense of belonging, 39 to 45. And for engagement, 24 to 29. Not as much as we would have hoped, but that was an interesting comparison.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you tell me do you have the questions just like you read the engagement for the sense of belonging?
Yes.
And then the teacher-student relationship?
Sense of belonging. How connected do you feel to adults at your school? How well do people at your school understand you as a person? How much do you matter to others at this school? How much respect do students in your school show you? And overall, how much do you feel like you belong at your school? So that's your sense of belonging. And I apologize, what's the other one?
Teacher-student relationship.
Teacher-student, yeah.
How many of your teachers are respectful towards you? If you walked into a classroom upset, how many of your teachers would be concerned? If you came back to visit class 3 years from now, how many of your teachers would be excited to see you? When your teachers ask you how you are doing, how many of them are really interested in your answer? And how many of your teachers would you be excited to have again in the future?
When you read
Thank you.
those questions, it seems sad that the numbers are so low.
If you don't mind? No. I just want to remind you, I'm actually thrilled by the results, and you're going to think I'm crazy. For both the middle school and the high school, we both have 2 grades in our buildings that have not been in school for a year and a half.
That's right.
So I am not concerned that our 10th graders may not see that sense of belonging, because they're just new freshmen to the high school as 10th graders. So they haven't had that full year to kind of get used to who the high school is and knowing their teachers. They also have not formed those relationships. So our 9th and 10th graders, which is 50% of our building, is really not forged those relationships yet, because this is like their first full year of school. So, you know, I'm actually encouraged by the numbers, because the 2019 numbers were worse, and those are students that were in the building. But we've done a lot, I know from the middle school and the high school, we've done a lot to kind of bring that together. And the student union is really working their tails off to try to bring that school spirit and sense of belonging together for us. So they may look a little bleak, but they're really not. And I just wanted everyone to highlight, know that. And this is our first screener. I think when we do our 3rd screener, I expect those numbers to go up.
And we can see the
have a-
breakout between the freshmen and sophomores, though, so you could tell if that's the case, that those numbers are lower there, and that's driving the overall numbers down, I guess. Is that all in the appendix?
I believe I put that in the appendix, and if not, I can get it to you.
I have a follow-up technical question, which you may be able to answer. So do the students move as a cohort from Hillside together, or you switch them around, or they move as a cohort to the middle school end? like when they have a class, they go from grade to grade, are they moving together as a cohort even when they enter the middle school, or you switch them with new people in the classes?
So I don't want to speak for elementary school because I'm not sure if they do. I do not think that they do. I think from grade to grade, they are mixed up. Once they come up to the 5th grade, they are a self-contained class, but then once they departmentalize in the 6th grade, they start to move around. So chances of a person two people being together in all classes through 6th, 7th, and 8th is very, very slim, because it's also based on a lot of different things that they take. So once they departmentalize, they start to spread out more. I'm not sure if I answered that for you.
For the
Okay.
most part, but it's okay.
Okay.
And to answer your question, it's not in the appendix. I can speak to it. So in terms of engagement between 9th and 10th, 9th is lower, 56 versus 61. And then, and this is, I'm sorry, that was climate.
We can probably send that,
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to go over
we
it.
can do that as a follow-up,
Yeah.
break it out by the grade.
Yeah, I have a quick question for you. Hearing you break down each of these components into the smaller components, is that something that you think you will do with teachers, or the principals will meet with the teachers to kind of say, this is the feedback we're getting in these certain areas, or how will the information be disseminated? And
Yes. Well, that's the plan. So the first part of this was for me to disseminate the information to the clinical staff. So they needed to know, we looked at students individually, so we looked at students that we didn't want to fall below, or maybe who were responding in very low numbers that we wanted to address that maybe we weren't aware of. So that is what the clinical staff is working on now.
were there many of those that you sort of were able to identify from this?
Well, it really depended, because initially, like when I looked at the data first, I was looking for students that had low numbers 2 or more, because those would be the ones that would be very much. But then I started noticing some students had high in some areas, and one area of challenge, like challenging emotions. And I knew that student, so when I looked at what that student had or who that student was, I knew, there we go, it was not a surprise. And the student answered honestly, so they understood that they were having challenging emotions based on the way the question was asked. So that part was not a surprise to us. So it's varied across the grades. And yes, we are planning on bringing this to the staff and sharing this information with them. Yes.
And then maybe, I don't know, Lou is feeling favorably about the direction it's going, but that may also drive PD choices going forward or something like that.
Yes.
And can I just say one thing? I appreciate other, can you go back? I want to ask about, yes. So this was compared to others nationally. Was it the same year? Because I'm just trying to figure out the comparison in terms of understanding
It's a
that
great
the
question.
variables
Yeah.
were the same across board or
It's
anything?
not. And so I asked this question, I want to say last year, 2 years ago, of Panorama, and it's basically they maintain a pool, basically. And so the pool is shifting based on who's taking it. So it's not that everybody in this, compared to others nationally, they all took it in 1 year. It's not
No,
that way.
I'm not talking about the year, I'm talking about, like, they can't provide a data like this if they haven't, like this, then that's not, like, if the variables were not in place, then probably, I just want to make sure, the reason I'm asking is I want to make sure that this is indeed compared nationally regardless of whether it was a year or 2 years. I'm just trying to make sure the variables were statistically done well, to
Yeah.
make sure that that's what I'm asking, so that
What-
it's falling within what we are seeing within the variables of this qualitative study, it's actually reflective.
Yeah, what they
Okay.
explained to me, it was national districts who participate in this Panorama SEL, and that it's not yearly comparison. So it's their pool, and it's not like everybody who took it between September and now.
Okay.
It's basically everyone in their national data set who participates in Panorama, where they scored, and then they benchmark us according to that.
Okay, do you know if there were Westchester participants in this overall
I
data?
do, actually, and it's interesting, there's a thread on my curriculum council And almost every district that I saw in our exchange is using Panorama for their SEL. Thank you.
So it raises an interesting question. I have something similar to what Damaris was saying, because, I could agree with Lou, except that I look at the comparison for the year, and it looks like everybody was living, and everybody took it at the same time, and everybody was going through the same thing. So we're low compared to everybody who had that experience. But it seems like that's not the case, because the national numbers are not taken at the same point in time that ours are taken. So those could have been taken when life was like pre-COVID even, possibly. So we're not really comparing apples to apples here.
It bothers me.
Yeah, the national, compared to others nationally, like, kind of means nothing.
So there was, during this national data, so what I'm trying to get at is, this is social emotional learning. The variables are extremely important for comparison to be made. So my concern is, if this pool, do you know how many years this pool was applied?
I don't, but I can find out.
Okay. And is there a way that we can also get a data that is more close to the year, so that it's, because life happens, and the social changes are just like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just really want to make sure that we are having a fair comparison. And fairly, with such social
Totally.
qualitative studies.
100%.
Yeah, 1 year is
I
good.
can't imagine they can't do that. It would be ridiculous for them
But I
to not
want
be able to do that.
Right, because then you might find that everybody had a 29% engagement rate because of last year.
And then that
You
would
know?
change compared to.
Totally, it would
national-
completely change the
Exactly.
picture.
Right, but we can also, I'm
But
sorry to
I need
interrupt.
to see it.
We can also just, if we just concentrate on the local numbers, some of them are,
What is the N on, like, grade 6 to 12? What is the N on this?
Almost every student took it.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
it's
it
almost
really
every
was
student.
everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a 90, I want to say 99
9%, yeah.
point something,
Okay.
take the screener. yeah.
Can I just add a broad question, and I'm not expecting a comprehensive answer, but considering that the drop-off looks like it happens once students move into a departmentalized setting, and students are not necessarily interfacing with one person who is their contact person, but rather they have multiple different people who they have to learn to accommodate to, I believe that the role of the counselors becomes much more important at that point in time as well. And so I'd like to understand how it is that the counseling department, beginning at the 6th grade level and on into the high school, how is it that they forge a relationship, understanding that students are probably going to come to counselors more since they haven't had the role of Ms. Snyder at the elementary school is quite different. How is that rapport established with students through the middle school, and then how is the information that's generated for each student and that relationship then transmitted and bridged into the high school setting? And how is that then built upon so that that new cadre of people who are meeting them in the high school setting establishes their own rapport with them? And again, I know that's a broad question, but, whatever information you could provide on that would be really helpful.
So the briefest answer would be that as soon as students enter into the 5th grade, they establish a relationship with their counselor. Counselors are in and out of classrooms. They see them through different arenas. They're at lunch. They push into classrooms to do lessons. They see students individually. So they're around quite a bit. And I'm downstairs in the middle school. I do see them consistently in and out of the counseling office. Those counselors will move with those students. So a 5th grade counselor stays with their 5th grade through 8th grade. So they're working a relationship for 4 years with those students, doing the same things each year with regards to pushing in, working with families, working with selecting classes and courses, working with Naviance and the home and careers and the health classes. So those are ways that they're getting to know their students more. Bridging over into the high school in previous years, and it'll be a little bit different this year because I'm jumping onto the 8th grade team to bridge them over into the 9th grade and work with the freshmen through the following year to help them bridge their transition and to help them to make those connections because we're seeing those dips. So I want them to have those connections deeper. We meet with the middle school counselors. All information that they intake, they give over to us. I sit in on all of their MTSS, on their SST meetings, on some parent meetings that they do have. We do 8th to 9th grade transition evening with them. I'll be sitting in with them when they're starting to select them classes, answering questions, be available to them. Have some ideas about bringing them up into the high school a little bit earlier to get them kind of connected into the building if they haven't been there, because that seems to be a little, sometimes they get a little, not worried, nervous to come into the building. It's something unknown to them. So, and then from then on, counselors will work with them through the high school to get to know them. Again, various ways. We also push into classrooms. We do programs with them. We do meet them individually. We work on selecting classes with them. College is a big thing, so we'll meet with them quite a few times when it comes to that arena with families. Students don't seem to have too many issues coming down and finding us if they need anything or they just want to hang out, say hello, they have some candy. So through all of these type of venues, we do get to meet them and know them better and watch them graduate.
Yeah, I'm not trying to belabor the point, but I think that looking at this column of the nationality part, if what happens in all middle school is the same, then it doesn't really, if they don't go as a cohort, what happens in middle school, again, if the variables are the same across, not exactly the same, but to some extent, they follow the same thing, then the concern starts with that part. From there, then we'll see whether the percentile is what is favorable to us as a district. So my concern is starting from the national piece. Because if it's the same, then we should, even if the favorable percentage is low, which is something that we don't also want, but then nationally, we are still at a high place, then it means that makes sense more to me. That is something that I can work with. But even nationally, it's that low when middle schools are middle schools everywhere. They face similar situations, and we are not looking at the variable close enough. This may be a huge error, because then if this was taken at before I can't breathe time, the social climate is totally different, and this is a really false. So I think that I would love for us to revisit this nationality piece to see whether it's close to, with COVID and everything. I don't mean to belabor the point, but I just want to make sure that we know what we are actually working with.
Yes, and I definitely want to reiterate, this was used as a diagnostic screener, so we're also looking at individual student level data.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about who do we need to have an eye on, so when we're thinking about our multi-tiered system of supports, like who may need more immediate intervention that might not already be on the radar, like we're able to drill down to student-specific data. And then the second thing that I would add, and I completely support that perspective, but the second thing I would also add is that middle column is us. This is our self-reported, our students self-reported in terms of favorability.
Well, for example, on engagements, 29% is the 0 to 19th percentile. What is 80th percentile? Is it 40%? I mean, how big is that? How big is that variation? Is it very tightly centered around the mean, so that it's just a few students who are pulling that down, or is it wider?
I wonder too, depending on what you find based on all these questions, if what you would think of doing some focus groups where you did pull out, maybe kids who are on the low end, but also that medium end where they're just kind of blah about life at school, to kind of dig in and find what is it. In our minds, everybody tries to patch holes immediately. Should we have advisories? Should we have these ways for kids to connect with adults? But maybe it's something totally different, so I wonder if those kind of focus groups with different levels of answers might reveal more
Yeah, if I
than
may.
we could figure out.
Yeah, Allison, that's a really good point. I might suggest, because when's the next administration? Jeanette?
February.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is, put my research hat on, you've put your thumb on a major issue here, which is the percentile comparison. What's the timing on that? We can figure that out. But that middle column is us, like it or not, that's us.
That's us.
And it's us collectively and it's us individually, as Melissa was saying, Jeanette's saying. I would suggest that the questions now, we list those, we gather those to organize how we respond to the second administration. Because between now and February to do all this inquiry, I'd rather get 2 data sets under our belt, that's the researcher and me. Even then, I might want 3, but at least 2, all these kinds of questions I think can come back. In the meantime, we can double check on the percentile, what period is that, how much swing is required to shift you in the percentile range, as has been asked. So simply, these are great questions. I'm suggesting we dig into them in an organized way once we get another data set under our belts, and then we can almost get into them pretty quickly because we've done our thinking on what the inquiry is, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. Thank you, Dr. McPherson, that would be great. And I just have 2 points. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the problem with drug and alcohol use in our community, and now this week we're seeing the engagement level in schools so low. I can't help but think that those 2 things are, correlated in some way, right? And 2, we have a student in our midst, and I'm just wondering, based off of your friends, are you surprised by these numbers that people are feeling a low sense of belonging, a really low sense of engagement to student-teacher? All these numbers, or is that not surprising to you?
I think it generally it makes sense. I think that my friends are mostly seniors, so like Mr. APHR said, we've had those regular years of school, but also at the same time we're all applying to college and taking all these classes, so I kind of understand why engagement is low in that area. It makes sense to me in a way, but I can't really have a perspective on any younger grades, really, just because I'm not really as familiar with them.
I'm very thankful you all are diving into this. I know it feels very exposed, I'm sure, and sometimes, it's not what you want to see, but I do think this is such an important step in finding out what's going on in the minds of kids, and the way the questions are asked seem really valuable. So I'm really pleased that we're making these steps to look further. Yeah.
And will you be sending the individualized results to families the way we got for the...
Because it's not accessible in the same way. So Panorama doesn't generate reports. So they gave us heat maps, and we can click into individual things, if we're seeing some trends. It's not done in the same way. But I don't want to speak for you in terms of the MTSS process of if there's a concern, what's the process?
So the process for MTSS is if on the heat map, if we're seeing that students, let's just take one particular student has 4 very low grades out of the 5 or 3 or something that's concerning to us, we bring it up at the meeting and we discuss it as a team, and the team makes some suggestions on how to speak to the student, address the student, see what supports we can offer. Maybe one team member has more information on the familial situation that's pulling this down for some particular reason. So there are many factors that could be at play here with regards to, you can't, I wouldn't just blanketly say, oh, the kid's unhappy and that's the end of it, because there's so much more to it. And I think that this is, as Dr. McCursey said, and as all of you have said, this is a first step to really kind of give us a good snapshot as to where we really need to start. And I respect all of the national data pieces, but I'm a boots on the ground gal, and this is where I want to begin, because I really want to look at the kids and get them going as fast as I can with things that will start addressing them, and hopefully that data will look different in February, and then I'm sure it'll look different again in May. And it'll be interesting, per Sabine's comment about seniors, I'm going to say you guys go into senior slide third quarter, so it's going to be interesting to see when we disaggregate the data for seniors how if that engagement goes down or if it may go up for senior internships. So there are different things that do happen across the year that may also fluctuate those numbers individually for students, some better, some not so good, so, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I'd asked to see the breakout between
Yes.
6th and 8th and 9th and
Yeah.
12th, because 6th and 8th is such an awkward,
Oh, yes.
horrible time when, your
Yes.
self-esteem just goes down in general.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I could see that could maybe pull the numbers down.
I want to just state for the record that my question was not in a way to say the organization that put it together are not doing their job. I'm sure it's accurate. I just was asking those persons to drill to the bone the importance of us taking this seriously if their statistics and how they did their research was accurate. So I want to say that for the record.
So just some overarching takeaways. I know we've started to have some preliminary conversations about the grade bands, and I can get you more information about grade level, the disaggregated
But it is
data by
interesting what you
grade.
find.
Yeah, but I can talk to the bands, which right now, there's little notable difference between FMS grades 6 through 8 and the high school grades 9 through 12 in terms of the results, and I'll show that in a moment. Variation is evident when comparing grade 5 results to 6 through 12, which Sylvia, I know you spoke to that. And then favorable results were highest at Hillside. And again, grades K through 2 were teacher reports. Okay, and so here you can see. So if you look here, you're looking at part 1 of the SEL grades 3 through 5. Okay, and this is the second part of 3 through 5 my pointer's is over here. Okay. And then if you look here, this is 6 through 12, part 1. You'll see the same indicators as with 3 through 5. And then part 2, 6 through 12, also replicating what was done in 3 through 5, is over here. And where it says employee survey, this was K2. And then on this side, you can see by building. So you've got FMS, which actually isolates 5th grade.
Oh, right.
Okay. HES, which isolates grades 3 and 4. That's an aggregate of 2 grades. And then, similarly, you're looking at the high school data here, 9 through 12. And again, this is grades 6 through 8, because it's the FMS data, grades 6 through 12, but it's only FMS, so you're really looking at 6 through 8. So I did want to show that. You can take a look, at the indicators, how they compare across the bands.
So you do see a drop-off between elementary and 5th grade and middle school.
Yep. You do, but you don't see as remarkable a difference as a 3rd and 4th that you do with like 6 through 8, right? That's a much bigger span. All right, so that's just to give a sense. Okay, so this is now, I want to get into the disaggregated results. And all of these areas, except supportive relationships in grades 3 through 5, show a variation of 10% more across some of the demographic groups. And it's not consistent, so when you're thinking about groups of students. There's a lot of text on these slides, so they are here at your fingertips, but I do want to point out a couple of things, right? And the first is when you're looking at, I just wanted to point out how these are written, just to be very clear. So if you look, some of these points are being compared in terms of students with IEPs as compared first to declassified students and then also the all students pool. But when you look in grades 6 through 12, you're seeing this is on purpose. So positive feelings less favorably when compared to declassified students, but not that same variation when compared to all students in the pool, right? So I just wanted to draw attention to those distinctions.
What are declassified students?
Students who used to have an IEP and no longer have an IEP. Thank you for asking. Okay. When you're looking at race, a couple of things to point out. Thank you. I wanted to explain what confidentiality protected is, because that matters when thinking about the data. So these are students of color with small sample sizes, so it wouldn't indicate a specific demographic group. And so it indicates confidentiality protected, so you cannot identify specific students as individuals. All right? there are a lot of concerns, as you can see here. You know, a couple things I just wanted to point out, right? So things that were here. So in grades 3 through 5, this is for non-white students. So Black students are reporting teacher-student relationships and school climate more favorably as compared to all students. Engagement, students with confidentiality protected are reporting teacher-student relationships, school climate, and sense of belonging less favorably, but engagement more favorably as compared to all other groups of students. And then in grades 6 through 12, we're seeing a lot of variation for Asian students, and that's also an area of concern.
Quick question. So so 3 to 5, which I can attest to, the Black students reporting teacher-student relationship as favorable, right?
More favorable, and school climate.
Yeah, and school climate, more in Hillside, right?
It's broken down 3 through 5, so it crosses two buildings.
Okay. It looks like 6 to 12 is all data for Asian students. Were there some for Black students as well for the 6 to 12?
We weren't seeing a variation of 10% higher or lower.
Got it.
So with regard to gender, we're not seeing a tremendous number of differences regarding gender. There are a few disparities, and so those are here. And then English language learners, I wanted to point out, they're actually our English language learners are providing more favorable responses in grades 6 through 12. Supportive relationships, positive feelings, more challenging feelings, so more feelings in general. Self-efficacy more favorably, emotion regulation more favorably, school climate, teacher-student relationships, sense of belonging, and engagement. So I wanted to point out some of these data points.
You know what I thought was interesting, if you go on the previous slide, is that when you say emotion regulation less favorably than male students, I think we tend to think that girls have it more together than boys do. Boys act out, and girls, you know, are able to keep their emotions in check, but it's interesting that that's not the results here.
And they're reporting less favorably. It would be interesting to know. So because it's 3 through 12, the students took it, it would be interesting to know if the teachers had reported on behalf of the students, if that would mirror. So how you're feeling with how someone's perceiving how you're feeling.
It's a really interesting
That would
point.
have been really interesting.
Totally interesting.
When we think about that. I looked at that. So any additional questions on the disaggregated data? There's a lot of information on this slide. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. All right, so now we'll delve into priority next steps, which is driven both by our leadership team goals and also by the survey data. So we will be administering the longitudinal survey 3 times per year, one more in the winter and one in the spring. The next one will be February. You know, we've begun our preliminary analysis of the screener. That will actually serve to inform these other steps, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So just to also highlight the data flow, so Jeanette and I have taken a look. The building leaders had an opportunity to look at all of this. Then we shared this district-wide with everybody. The next step will be the MTSS team to inform the interventions. We're waiting for certain reports from Panorama. We've asked for additional information. So we're digging more deeply, and we'll ask the questions that were posed tonight as well. And then Jeanette, DBT.
So two of the discussions, 3 and 4, I'll briefly, some of the things we've been thinking about. So advisory, I know we've mentioned it here, you know, through our challenge success team that has been revitalized for this year at the high school, we're exploring the idea of advisory. Research into advisory programs shows that it does increase connectivity and positive relationships for students and staff. It lowers the non-academic barriers to learning, and it supports students through challenges. So I'm a big proponent of it. We are facing some challenges with it. Bottom line is, it's all the nuts and bolts of it. It's not what we would do with the advisory, but it's who, what, how do we implement it, how does everybody get into it? And middle school would probably step in line with that once we've worked through what we need to work through. So we're looking at that. Through the advisory, the DBT Steps A, which is the dialectical behavior therapy, the school-based interventions, which is the Step A piece of it, it does infuse the SEL curriculum, and it teaches such topics as mindfulness, as distress tolerance, as emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. And we're finding, and I'll speak for the high school because I'm housed there, even though I'm throughout the buildings, that distress tolerance is high. We have a lot of students that don't have that, and that's a tough one. So we're finding that that's a good way to, get to them with that. The mental health first aid, we had that implemented prior to our COVID shutdown. We had 33 teachers on board for the first session that we were going to do, but we shut down, so that went by the wayside. That is being revitalized. So that's a national program to teach skills to adults so they can recognize and respond to signs of mental health challenges and distresses, and triage those while students are in the classrooms, recognize it, triage it, and then report it to the appropriate individuals for further school support. So it's essentially a program for mental wellness. So we're reinstituting that again in the spring.
And then crisis prevention and intervention. Our special education department is taking the lead on providing those trainings. Both Laura and Tesfa are trained providers. And so we have a cohort that's actually in training right now. And a big portion of CPI training, crisis prevention and intervention, is around recognizing and meeting students where they are behaviorally and emotionally, and actually working on de-escalation techniques, like really thinking about what needs to happen in the environment through the instruction, through the practitioner-student relationship to be able to de-escalate within classrooms. And then finally, our next presentation will focus on culturally responsive pedagogies, and this will highlight some of our district efforts in this area and the information that we're receiving from the Panorama survey. The screener will be used to inform some of where we're putting some of that professional learning also in that area as well.
You said that the mental health first aid is for the teachers, right?
Well, it's not just for teachers. We had aides, monitors, secretaries, administrative assistants, anyone who wanted to be a part. Anybody who has interaction with students, we welcome them into that particular group. Our first trial run, that didn't happen, only was able to hold 35. That was when we could be in a room where we could be interactive, and then school closed, and then when we tried to institute it the following year, the whole 6-foot distancing and everything just was not working, and it wasn't really a healthy way to do it via the Zoom. So we said we're going to wait until we could be actually in person. The challenge we'll face with that is I won't be able to do 33 in one session. It'll have to be done over multiple sessions with smaller groups of teachers, monitors, aides, anyone who wants to be a part of it, yes.
Because, it's obviously nice to have the counselors in each school,
Yep.
but really the teachers are the ones who are the first.
They're the first responders, yeah.
Totally,
Yeah.
who really know their students and when
Yeah.
things change.
Yeah.
I know we have another big presentation to move into, but this actually relates to a conversation I had today with the principals, Melissa and I did, this is about our students, but if the SAL is not healthy and strong with our adults, you start to not have a surprise that you might start to see some of these. And we know that this is an incredibly stressful time for staff. As calm as I'm dare I say, preaching it, sorry I had to say it, this new uptick is got people concerned and worried. And so I think part of what, easy for me to say, because I just sit here, the rest of the people do the hard work, but I think it is us really paying attention to the SEL, and that is SEL for our adults.
That's right.
And we're not going to survey, but we are actively talking about this and looking at it, because it's really, really important.
Yeah,
So,
if I could be a little bit contrary here, the next steps are certainly valid and interesting, but, to make a bad metaphor, but a true one, in zoos in the 1960s, 1970s, they had trouble breeding offspring for captive animals. And what they discovered over time was that they were feeding them what they thought they should get, which was just muscle meats, and that they realized, even though there were all these experts working on this, in zoos and so many people paying attention, they sort of missed the fact that when an animal in the wild goes to eat another animal, it goes through the liver first. And then the entire sort of field of alimentation changed, and it became a success story, just to wrap it up tightly. So, I feel like this is a very, very, very adult perspective to take. And I think that, like this, the example of zoos, we need to ask a little bit better question. And when it comes to kids, what do we want them to experience when we're talking about self-efficacy or sense of belonging or engagement? We want them, how do they get there? They experience things like mastery, camaraderie, joy, wonder, whatever it is. And to me, the thing that we need to look at is how do we provide that more to kids? I think if you looked at, I think there's a natural pathway where kids exit the sort of hothouse environment of Hillside, which is wonderful, and then naturally, and wherever they would be in the world, it's a time where things kind of break down, and then it's up to the child to sort of put things back together. And they need the tools in that nadir to sort of climb their way out. So to me, I would expect a natural pathway not to just be 90s across the board, but to sort of go down and come back up as people differentiate into who they are. And those things of mastery and camaraderie and all, I bet you if you gave this test to kids who are involved with sports or kids who are into theater, these numbers would be much better. And it's those kids in the middle that don't have access to those things or don't have a pathway into those things that my intuition tells me is, are left sort of with academics only, that it's a much harder road. And just speaking as a parent, 2 examples, this week there were modified basketball tryouts, and modified was set up, my understanding years ago, as a sort of, JV was competitive, it had cuts, it expected certain skills, and modified was sort of a more welcoming environment, and it is. But there's a lot of interest in it. And so we had a whole bunch of cuts that were made to the modified basketball teams. And these are 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. I bet you very few of those 12-year-olds, once cut, are ever going to come back to that sport again. And I feel like the effort should be kid-centered. It should be, are we providing the resources for a child to experience, again, mastery, camaraderie, all those things in that critical middle phase. And even something like scheduling. My daughter's in 7th grade, and in the first semester, they have art every other day, which is the only time they have it that frequently, and the only time they will. Moving forward, they don't. She has it every day, and she's come home and taken to drawing in her room. And it's sort of, when we value those things that give children that chance, it gives them a chance to value it. And so I don't disagree with the sort of adult perspective, but I think we're missing something quite obvious. And to Bill's point, I would recommend, and I would agree that sort of looking into not just the data, but what are the anecdotes? Because the data, I know the school quite well, and it doesn't feel like this school to me. It doesn't feel like the amount of effort that parents put in and the teachers put in. So I'd like to see, I'd be curious to see what the anecdotes are. But this, to me, my intuition, this would be an area that we really shouldn't overlook.
And I think to your point a little bit, Alex, that it would be interesting to see if the kids who are not doing well in school, grade-wise, are the ones who are feeling disengaged.
I'm sorry, say again?
The kids who are not doing well in school academically are the ones who are feeling disengaged because they're not doing well. If you find all the kids who get all the hundreds, they're probably loving school and everything about it.
No, but
successful.
This was bothering me all weekend, and I talked to a bunch of parents, and a sort of interesting picture comes out, which is that, obviously there's a lot of pressure as kids get older to sort of do well and get into a good college, and they tend to edit out the things that are non-academic or tangential or whatever, and they sort of left. I just feel like, and that's a sort of a valid, reasonable choice, but they're kind of left without that attachment to sort of learning for the love of learning or just all this experiential stuff. So, I don't know. It just strikes me as
it's
obvious.
Compared to the national.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked the first question. If it's compared to other schools and they are all in the same boat, we will not be at the lower end of things because of the variables. So, yes, I agree with you that that's why I wanted to get that going first. I asked that question first, and I keep asking it because if that's the variable that is impacting everybody, then that percentile compared to the nationality should not be on the lower end. That is 101 statistics. So that's why if that part, I mean, you are the mathematician here, but if that part was done well, then regardless of all these anecdotal or whatever the state is, we shouldn't be on the lower end of it nationally. That's all I'm saying.
No,
That is very factual, though.
Just functionally, with like getting back to modified basketball, because that's the example I made, I'd rather have a second modified basketball team.
Totally. Those
Then-
kids were so disappointed, the ones who got cut.
It's crushing.
It's awful.
But anyway, I think I've made my point, so.
Yeah, well, I think the good news here is that this gives us something to work with and
Yes,
dig into and
absolutely.
follow through on. And then I think for us as administrators, it's less is more here. Meaning if we're going to dig into this, we have to sort of maybe pull back on some other things we're doing and really understand it. And there's a giant counterintuitive here, right? That I'm looking at, and I'm almost done because I know we got a bigger presentation coming right at us. Engagement's at 29%, grades 6 through 12. We just, a couple weeks ago, gave you an academic impact report that says that we're doing very, very well academically. And the research would suggest we shouldn't have that finding. So I think that's more reason to say we need to work with this, see what's here. And I think all these questions are excellent. They kind of help guide us to when we get another data set, really understand. And in the less is more spirit, here in Hastings, let's keep an eye on maybe then there are some significant decisions as relates to staffing and space usage. So you can have 2 modifieds or whatever it is, or 15 bands, or something, whatever that's going to be. So,
And one thing that I can just say might, I can only speak anecdotally about my own child, but, when my son got his test results or his quarter results, he didn't understand why he got a 96 and a 97 in library and art. They go from Hillside where he gets 1, 2, 3, 4, and suddenly he's getting, a 97, which is a great grade. I mean, it's a 97, right? But he's like, I participated, I did everything, I did all my work. I don't understand why I didn't get 100. And, I don't know if there's a conversation with the kids at that level to explain what happened, but, like in grades, like in like math and art and library, to not understand why you're not doing well when you're just like participating. I think that gets in kids' heads that, it gets like, I'm not engaged because I'm not doing well, even though it's a great grade.
I think this is a good opening to this conversation, as Bill just referenced. And Melissa and Jeanette, thank you for pulling this together.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Obviously, a lot more to continue to look at with this presentation, so thank you.
Especially with our disaggregated data. Our
Yes.
students with IEPs, our Asian students, like, there are things that, we
To continue to look into.
Yeah.
So why don't we move now to our next presentation, I think
Yeah, Janice is on the way.
Denise is here.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeanette.
Thank you, Janet.
Hi, Janice.
thank you, Jeanette.
I think I'm charged up enough, that's why I figured instead of.
Okay, so, as that's getting up onto the screen. So our second presentation to you this evening focuses on our work in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this work is extremely important, not just because New York State says so, but particularly in light of what we've just seen when we're thinking about some disparities for groups of students, right? And we want to make sure that we're creating and honoring and meeting the needs of all of our learners throughout the system and ensuring welcoming, affirming environments, high expectations, rigor, and we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of every single learner. So our presentation to you this evening will include information about the New York State Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education Framework, and that's really what's grounding our why, the purpose of our efforts, that's serving as our anchor. And we'll provide a very brief overview of the framework as our presentation is really focused on our efforts here in Hastings. However, there are lots of comprehensive links both to the framework and other documents that are embedded here. So you have access to more information. So over the summer, Janice and I spent a whole lot of time together, and we designed a 3-year plan that was created with input from the English and Social Studies departments, the state roadmap that was released, the New York State Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education Roadmap, and then thinking about our local needs given the trajectory of what's already occurred in Hastings over the years. So we're going to share some slides that highlight the 3-year plan, which is our what, and we will focus on year 1 of the plan tonight, which is where we are right now, so September through to now in December. And that's our current implementation year. We'll conclude with some concrete examples of the work, and that's really the how. How has this been happening? And we'll take some questions at the end of the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Janice.
So New York State has done a really great job of giving us a vision. What does the culturally responsive sustaining education look like? So it's grounded in an educational system that creates students who experience academic success. Students are socio-politically conscious, socio-culturally responsive, and students who have a critical lens for which they can challenge inequitable systems of access, power, and privilege. So this is the vision from New York State. In terms of the purpose, New York State has also shared with us how stakeholders can come together to implement policies and practices that educate all students effectively and equitably. And for the most part, we're creating student-centered environments that affirm cultural identities, foster positive academic outcomes, develop students' abilities to connect across lines of difference, elevate historically marginalized voices, empower students as agents of social change, and contribute individual student engagement, learning, and growth. In terms of our definition, New York State has provided us with a definition. It's based on decades of research and asset-based pedagogies. It's grounded in a cultural view of learning in which multiple expressions of diversity, and they define diversity for us as race, social class, gender, language, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, and ability, are recognized and regarded as assets for teaching and learning. So in terms of the culturally responsive sustaining framework, we need to talk a little bit about what is culture. And it includes the multiple components of our identity, which are included but not limited to the list provided on the left. And culture transcends practice such as cuisine and art and music, and it also has ways of thinking, values, and forms, and our forms our expression, informs our expression, excuse me. And quite a few years ago when I presented, we talked about through the ELL department the importance of looking at culture, the deeper pieces of culture. So for me, culturally responsive sustaining framework is ENL gone mainstream. So we look at when you look at the framework, what we're asking educators to do is to move beyond the surface piece of culture and to start looking into the deeper pieces of culture. And what does that look like in a classroom? So, in summary, we're talking about how culture and education influences our student experiences, how we need to look at students' cultures and position them as strengths, have students have a feeling of belonging, motivation and success, and achievement in schools, and teaching. It's all about really teaching each and every student that's sitting in front of you. So now the how. So New York State has also given us the how. It's given us a framework to look at. It's given us 4 different domains. We have the welcoming and affirming environment, inclusive curriculum and assessment, the high expectations of rigorous instruction, and the ongoing professional learning. So this is how we're going to achieve culturally responsive sustaining education.
So now that we've learned a little bit more about the why of the work, this section of our presentation is dedicated to highlighting our 3-year implementation plan. And this is actually coming from, at the beginning of the year with the leadership team goals, there was a link to the culturally responsive goal that we've had, and this implementation plan was in there, but we've divided it by slides so it's a little bit more clear and we can focus year by year. So this is the progression of the work. It shows across context. This plan, again, was created using a couple of things. So the guidance from New York State, the 3-year implementation roadmap, Then we designed the Hastings implementation roadmap, year 1, year 2, year 3, with input from the faculty. And then we'll focus on year 1.
So for year 1, this is just a snapshot of some of the things that were done, and I'm sure that you can read through it. But year 1 is really all about having a strong emphasis of bringing awareness to what is culturally responsive education and how to use the framework. So that's what year 1's goal is. So in terms of the district, we have the state roadmap, and then we have our local roadmap. So district-wide, we're looking at using the diversity committee as a way to support this, and our race matters committee, where we're looking at racial equity days and beautification projects. In terms of our year 1 at Hillside, we're looking at our Sparks curriculum. We're looking at grade level teams. I'm working with each team to unpack the culturally responsive framework. And we're working with the CARES committee as well. And we're working with affinity groups. At Farragut Middle School, we're working with the English and social studies departments. And again, with the affinity groups. And at the high school, we're also working with the affinity groups, and we're working with the social studies and history teachers right now. For year 2, the focus of year 2 is bringing more awareness, again, of the culturally responsive sustaining education and building capacity. So now not just understanding what it is, but actually implementing it. So this is kind of, I don't need to go through it because we're not in year 2 yet, but at least you can see where we want to go. Again, diversity, using the diversity committee and affinity groups to kind of work together. And this is a living document that could change over time depending on our needs. So that's year 2 at the elementary school. Our goals, same thing for Farragut Middle School, and then moving on to Hastings High School. And then for year 3, the expectation is that there's a full implementation of CRSE. So it's a 3-year process. And once again, we have what our goals are using the state roadmap for district-wide, Hillside Elementary School, Farragut Middle School, and Hastings High School.
And in terms of the state roadmap in each of these sections, that's directly a lift from what the roadmap expectations are. Okay.
Oh, you don't expect it, huh?
There's some mosquitoes.
Yes.
Sorry. I'm the same way.
I thought it was a comment on the state.
I knew right away it was a bug.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to dip into examples of the fine work Janice has been doing. She's been very, very busy working with members of the faculty in a variety of different contexts. And as we were creating this portion of the presentation, you know, we thought it would be best to chunk it with examples of what's going on at the high school, what's going on at the middle school, what's going on at the elementary school, district-wide. There are community connections, and really professional learning is the thread that runs through all of it. We did list it as a separate bullet, but that's a little bit misleading because that really is a through line with everything. All right.
So in terms of the work I've done since September to November, as you can see, the main focus is obviously professional learning and getting an understanding of what is culturally responsive sustaining. So I've been in the 3 buildings. I've been meeting with every team level grade at Hillside. At the high school, I'm meeting with social studies and English department teachers, and the same thing at Farragut Middle School. So that's kind of the work that's happening there. Again, working with affinity groups, or working on the Mural projects at FMS, designing lessons with teachers, co-teaching with educators. And of course, what's great about the position is that now teachers are able to just drop in and say, hey, I'm not really sure about something. So they come in, we talk about it, and then we can work on something together, and I push into their classroom and teach with them. So it's just building awareness and capacity.
Would you say overall you've had any pushback from the teachers?
Not so far, no. Actually, the teachers seem much more welcoming because we're not only talking about it, but then I come into the classroom so that I'm co-teaching with them. So they find that extremely helpful.
What's your impression have you heard feedback at the building levels at all? Positive?
In terms of district-wide, I've had weekly meetings with Dr. Szymanski. We've been working really closely together. I've been working with the Diversity Committee, which we have a meeting this Thursday. We're working on a digital toolkit to provide resources for our different stakeholders. We're working on our racial equity days, which is happening on the first week of February for each building. I'm a part of the Professional Learning Committee, creating culturally responsive presentations for educators. We've designed a current events protocol that you can link on. Again, consulting with stakeholders, consulting with the affinity group, consulting with the librarian, who's had some concerns over some of the issues that have come up around banned books. I've also been working as a district liaison with our community organizations. And for my own professional learning, I've been coaching with Metamorphosis, which I'm thankful to the board that supported that. I've been attending monthly DEI regional network meetings, so all of Lower Westchester County now has diversity coordinators, and we're all kind of working together and attending regional workshops. So what does this look like? This is one of the presentations that I created. So when I met with each teacher, we kind of talked about what is CRSE and provided just, a snippet so that we can talk about what it is and what it looks like in their classroom. In the history department, after I shared the CRSE, there were lots of questions about, well, what does this look like in a classroom? So to support them, what I did was I reached out to a social studies chairperson who does culturally responsive education and had a great conversation with him and kind of put all of that in a document for them. And the teachers are extremely thankful for the detailed information that provides them with an understanding, not just the theory, but what it looks like in practice. Dr. Catrone was actually one of my drop-ins, and he was interested in learning more about CRSE, and we had a conversation. He was teaching the house on Mango Street, so we started thinking about what are some things that we can do. So we took the vignette My Name, and there's a part in there where the character says that the Mexican records her father plays on Sunday mornings when he's shaving, it sounds like sobbing. And so we decided to do a lesson about the soundtrack of our lives and how music kind of plays important roles in our lives. So we did that lesson. And then that went really well, and he was like, let's do another one. So we looked at those who don't, and there's a section in the story where she talks about how she lives in her Chicago community, and it's all brown all around. And we started thinking about, well, what does that mean and why? So we started looking at the history of Chicago and redlining, and we had a really great conversations with students about that. That's kind of the work we've been doing.
And that's and I can fairly say that's an understated presentation of it. I had the opportunity to see one of those lessons, and it was really interesting to see the students actually go into maps of the area and thinking about regional differences even as they're driving down the sawmill, and what are you noticing and why might that be, and really just getting into just critical thinking around how what they were learning around the history of redlining was also, it was interdisciplinary. It pushed them right back into the text to find, text-based anecdotes of what was happening, and to be able to connect the local context with the regional context with the book itself. And it was actually really powerful to see. And the students were engaging in small group conversations and then sharing out more broadly. So I do think, just from a place of, there's a lot of emotion sometimes that's associated with, exploring issues around race, around socioeconomic status, around gender. And these were conversations that were very carefully and thoughtfully structured with questions that were planned in advance, and really providing students with the opportunity to practice through small group conversations first before they had a larger whole group conversation as a whole class. And so I just wanted to say that I know that you've been humble in presenting your work. This was a lesson I happened to see, and it was quite powerful.
Thank you. And I've been working with the fifth grade team, creating Sparks curriculum, and our first lesson was about identity. So children had an opportunity to create poetry about who they are. So these are two examples of the poems that the fifth grade students created. And finally, for our mural project, I'll give you that.
May I make a comment about the fifth grade?
Sure.
I just want to share that this curriculum is something that some of our fifth grade teachers were really grappling with, step out of their own comfort zone, and just really appreciate the time and the support and the education that Denise has been working with the teachers and helping them prepare so that their novels and that their work is received really well by all. So it's been a huge success, so thank you.
It's been a lot of fun working with the kids. It's interesting how in the beginning they were so afraid. And I guess since I do it day in and day out, it just comes naturally to me. So then to finally be in the classroom with them, we're now on lesson 2 and I've worked with them about 3 times now pushing in, and their response now, like I see them like taking over and I can step back now, which is really nice to see. That's great.
Was the fear more of the poetry side or the content side?
The content.
Yeah.
The content, it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be that
Teachers have, I mean, they've shared with me too, that, even thinking about how we started this presentation, like what's going on socio-politically in our world right now, right? There's a lot around this, and people are nervous. I think everyone is really invested in doing right by children and making sure that we are creating those really welcoming environments where we're honoring everybody and we're coming to this work and knowing what's going on in other places and even in neighboring districts, and knowing that everybody just wants good things for children and wants to feel supported and wants to have those models has been really important.
I told Dr.
Do
Mackenzie
you want to wait till they get
to-
through?
Yeah, but I'm not going to do it now.
Oh, you
I
sure?
No, I will do it, but not,
Oh, okay.
not this very moment.
Oh, well,
What I wanted to, I will certainly do it. I prepared so that I'm succinct,
no.
not that succinct. But I just wanted to say that you mentioned something, Melissa, and I just wanted to echo what you said, that we all want the same thing for all of our children. It's about coexistence, and it doesn't have to be awkward.
Yeah.
It really shouldn't be awkward. And this whole level of discomfort is unfounded, because it's all about learning to coexist and helping each other to familiarize with things that otherwise we are not familiar with, and it's okay. Like it's okay. So
Well,
I
what
just
I
wanted
can
to.
say, and I do, first of all, I want to give a shout out to our faculty and to Janice. I think there's really tremendous work going on, like from the leadership level to the teacher level to the staff level. There's a lot of great work going on, particularly in this area. And I also want to give a shout out to our community as a whole, because I'm very aware of what's going on regionally, and I feel like what's been happening here in Hastings right now is really productive dialogues, really thoughtful questioning, really exactly what we want to see in terms of how students are learning to engage, like having thoughtful conversations where if there are questions or if there are any kind of disagreements, like we work it through, and presuming good intention and knowing that we all have the same thing in mind, which is that we want good environments for our children, and we want to take what we see in our data points, what we hear from our students, very, very seriously, right? And we want everyone to be in a good place and understand that this is important, and being able to learn and have these kinds of conversations is very important. So, kudos to the whole Hastings community, frankly, because I know some of you who have picked up a newspaper, and, you could pick up any old district, and there's a lot of acrimony around this work, and I really support that we are doing well here, and we are having good conversations, and it's, good people navigating things, right? So, just wanted to mention that.
If I can ask a question, what is this, so with the CRSE framework, and you know I'm not a big fan of the rubric. I understand, it's quite easy to understand how it looks like in the younger grades. But, talking about the needs of the students, one of the sort of core needs is not even just learning, but sort of self-actualizing as they go through their education. And part of that, especially when they get older, is to really get into less firm ground and more challenging things and more confounders and conflict, really, that they have to sort of parse and resolve and sometimes see there's no good option or there's two bad options, or, it's complexity that's revealed to them. And so, like with the rubric, not to beat up on the rubric, but how do you assess a nonfiction text or something like 1984? What's the process with that?
Do you want to share a little more about the current events protocol? I don't know if we can click into it, actually. Because the reason I'm mentioning the current events protocol that was designed is that it's more globally, I don't know if, Patrick, are we able to be live on one of those links or no? There's a link in a document that I was hoping to pull up if we might.
I think he has in Google Docs, he didn't convert it.
Okay, so I could just go to the screen. But that, even though it was designed to be the current events protocol, it is more broadly applicable in terms of some of the considerations. And I think you're also talking about that NYU rubric, which is another resource that we're using in terms of social justice orientation. And it's not the only resource we're using, but Janice, you can speak more specifically to what you're working on with them.
In terms of the current events protocol?
Yeah, and
So-
even how, looking at text.
Well, so can I give it an actual example? Because maybe it might be,
Yeah.
is that helpful or? So a book like Studs Terkel's Race, sort of the firsthand account of examining, the Rodney King, in 1992 in LA, where he interviewed whole swaths of society. Or one of my favorite books, Common Ground, about the desegregation of the Boston school system in the 1970s. How would those things make it into the curriculum, or how would they be excluded from the curriculum? That's my concern, looking at that.
Yeah, so coming off of last year, we actually created a roles and responsibilities protocol, essentially, like who does what, where does the locus of control lie in terms of selection of text versus, creating curriculum. So, the teachers have always had autonomy with their texts, and so the beauty in having Janice in this position is as a thought partner to be able to push into a classroom, attend a team meeting, sit together, and start to talk about and explore additional resources. That's now possible. It's not a district, like we're choosing your books for you, and nor do I want to be in that position. I think it's constantly around how are we engaging collaboratively so that we can, we can take a look at the resources we have, we can think forward about what are some additional resources that might be helpful. The House on Mango Street, for example, was a new introduction in 8th grade this year. I'm not sure, Janice, if you have the history of how that particular text was selected, but the teams have started to look at that, and they have used, 5th grade we sat. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, Dr. Pedro just brought it here.
He brought it.
Yep, it was just something he's talking about.
Right.
And I want to add and
So,
say
well,
that.
if I
Okay.
may, I
Sure,
think
go
those two examples, there would be, I think it's really within, I think the larger framework for me is on slide 9 here. It's a keep coming back to welcoming and affirming,
Correct.
high expectations and rigor, even
Correct.
though some people say don't use the term rigor. Inclusive curriculum and assessment, ongoing
Correct.
professional learning and support. So I think those two references, those books, and the text, we are teacher strong in how texts arrive here.
That's right.
So that's where it's being inclusive, supportive, and the professional learning around it. I would be very disappointed if we were excluding those types of texts. I think, that, I mean, in a sense, you almost threw a softball.
I did.
Unless I'm thinking maybe I'm going to get pinned on this, because then you're going to say, well, no, these teachers rejected those. But, I mean, the governor on that would be, on my mind, at what point and how are students ready really to grapple with that, the Turkle work and the common ground work. But there should be immense room for us to have those texts in.
Yeah, I mean.
We're in discussion, but I want to say one thing. We are working really hard to listen to those who have
That's
concerns.
right.
Correct,
We are sprinting to those who have concerns.
correct.
And Janice, thank you for sprinting to those who have concerns. And I'm getting involved, but there has to be some layering so that people can feel like kind of what these steps. But everyone who's come to us with a concern, no judgment, we engage, we get in a dialogue, and it's making a difference, because we're not going to be perfect on this stuff.
I want to say something very quickly, which is not part of what I wanted to share as a statement that I typed out. But, I mean, again, I've been in public education for almost 20 years, and I said this before I was aboard publicly, that you don't go to a faculty and just choke things down their throat that way. But also, there is that oversight with curriculum that should allow integration for all of us to learn about ourselves. And I think I've said this to one or two people here, that when I was in medical school, and it's still in the books, the classification of inflammation, number one is redness. It's all black people sitting there. You remember we were talking about it?
Remember.
I don't see no redness. That's a dogma. I'm not even kidding you. You can go and check in all these medical books. And so, because again, it's not about shame, but it's about the fact that sometimes these things, we don't recognize it because it's been what has been, right? So that's why the effort of integration is important. Science education is trying to change, because you are not even learning about yourself. And people close to me, blood siblings are doing research, prostate cancer. Like, I can go on and on and on, where the test is not picking up PSA, the PSA is not picking up specific ethnic groups. Because, again, that consideration, it's not because people are trying to be diabolic, because doctors are not trying to take care of one patient over the other. But if we are not coming with that solution-oriented and that non-judgmental approach, it will be a healthy way forward, and I'm looking forward to that. We have a baseline that is not level. We all know that. How do we work together to that space of coexistence that will help all of us? And again, we'll make mistakes, but anyway, I will leave it here and do my statement later when I'm reading it.
And I just have a question, because I think that I think you're done with the presentation, right? Obviously, we've become aware of some issues around courageous conversations, the class, and various issues from various parents. And one of the things that came up to me from a parent was that they were upset that there was no kind of class description or sharing of syllabus or what the topics would be versus any other class that has those. And I'm wondering, for me, I'm always about communication, because communication leads to transparency, and then there's no surprises, and then you know what's happening, So, because when things aren't transparent, it feels like things are being hidden. Why are you hiding that? Why won't you just tell me that? And then that leads to suspicion and problems. So I'm wondering if in that particular case, because this has come up to me from several parents who have had this conversation, if it would be possible to share that, because I think that could help to dissipate concern about that particular classroom, because I think that particular class comes up a lot. And for me, that seems to be the main reason why, is because it's like shrouded in mystery, which is, I think, the main issue around it.
Yeah, I mean, I think frankly, it's a very big ask culturally, because I have never collected people's lesson plans, for example. So in the same way that I wouldn't have someone's math lesson, I wouldn't ask them for their music lesson, or, and every once in a while someone will bounce ideas off with me, but it's a much larger question that has little to do about the class and more to do about, how are we sharing things. So we do actually have the curriculum synopses, and those are posted. And that was a very big leap forward for us as a district. So those, they are broken down by grade level. We have also, when anyone has raised a significant concern, the teacher has even sat down and sat with the parent and shared about the lessons and talked about how they're, how that's happening. So there's absolutely zero intention, to hide anything or to not be transparent. But I think when you're thinking about marrying school and district culture with teachers and pedagogy, right? And then thinking about, what people are hoping for in terms of like a fleshed out lesson plan, like that's not even so even within the context of a lesson observation, we aren't necessarily as administrators collecting somebody's lesson plans.
And I guess maybe lesson plan isn't clear. One knows if my child is going to be in 5th grade math, they're going to learn division multiplication. Maybe not that in 5th grade, but I know what they're expected to learn. In ELA, they're going to learn how to read. It's going to be essay writing. It's going to be reading nonfiction, whatever it is. I'm just saying, like, it's clear for parents, I think, what some other classes are about, and maybe less clear about this. And I was just saying that if that was more illuminated, it might help, was my point.
And I would suggest like the first step to go to those curriculum synopses, which talks about here are the topics that we're addressing, here are the things that, and it's written in adult language. So it's not that, someone would start a lesson and say, okay, everybody, today we're talking about blank, which is the front-facing adult version of how that's being received. But it isn't something that we've done regularly here, share lesson plans. So that's a point of tension, and I respect that, and I understand that, and I've had some direct conversations back and forth with people about that. And then I've also sat in on discussions where there's been a sharing and a discussion about what happens in the class, how is the lesson framed, so nothing is being hidden. It's just not been part of, Hastings culture to hand a lesson plan to a parent, for example. Which I understand, and I also understand why, somebody may think something's being hidden where there's definitely no intention around that as well.
Janice, do you want to speak to this a little bit? Because this is something we've been spending a lot of time on.
Yeah, I would also say that it's not like the course started last year. It's been a course that's been around for 5 or 6 years. So it's not hidden because children have taken the course. You could ask any child who's taken the course. And we do have the curriculum synopsis. So it's not like even the topics are hidden. But I'm not sure where the idea of hiding curriculum comes from, because we wouldn't ask these questions of any of the other subjects. So that's for me where I'm confused in terms of the idea of things being hidden, or this idea that they.
Well, I guess in the case of this class, it's much more theoretical than the fact-based of everything else, which makes it, an uncomfortable issue for people to understand, or a difficult issue, versus some of the others. I mean, it's not the same. It's more about theories and ideas versus science and math,
So I'm not sure if it's theories.
And what we've been doing, it's a really good question. And every single parent who's surfaced with that question, we've engaged with them. I mean, we're sort of taking advantage of our smaller scale. And it's purposeful that they work teacher to then Janice to principal. Jennifer, you've been in these conversations, and at times I've been in the conversations, because the curriculum synopsis does exist. It is in terminology, and it's thus quite parallel to what you might find across all of the disciplines and subject areas, but it often needs a discussion, because some of what's in there, and hats off to Hastings for staying so calm. This has been about the most calm 90-minute conversation on DEI in the United States. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. In the United States of America right now, they've had 90 minutes this calm on this topic. Is mind-blowing, because that's what we need. But I think, and we're going to have people who don't stay calm, but our attempt is have that exact conversation. and be able to walk through. Because in the curriculum synopsis are things that some people will turn where they want it to go. So that's where we say, in a sense, let's have a courageous conversation with you about what's here. Because there's some very significant cultural issues here. I think a strength of Hastings is the autonomy of teachers to do great stuff. And that's that line we're walking. But I think a step right now is, let's talk. So you as board members, if a parent comes to you and says, oh my goodness, please direct. Respect and direct them to us, let us engage. And we're keeping all of that in a collective way to then say, maybe there need to be, or not, some adjustments, if that's helpful.
I want to quickly, what I want to add is that we also have to be, I mean, I have personally been in this, and I'm just saying this from a personal place. We have to be careful the expectations that sometimes we place on others compared to others. Because, and I have called it out in my institution, where because I'm a person of color, Damaris, you should meet, blah, blah. I'm like, why? Is Dr. So-and-so doing that? I'm not doing it, right? So let it be people's concern. But if it's not equitable, I am not doing it because so-and-so is not doing it. Is that the responsibility? So the fact that some people may, I know Janice is doing work beyond a teacher on assignment. That work is an administrative role. We have diversity officers as full-timers and as administrators, even in the college where we have adults. She's going beyond. How many times do you meet? Like Melissa was saying, other teachers on assignment are not putting that effort. So sometimes when, and sometimes people have mistaken, and I'm talking from a personal place, because I am so dedicated to what I'm doing, then there's that entitlement of, and I'm like, no, stop right there. Don't go any further. So I understand, I mean, I share this with you. It's true. The optics may appear hidden, but if there's if all the classes have these synopses, it has to be available so that people would at least know, and that would be helpful.
Yep.
Okay.
So, yes, Janice is working very hard. I have learned a lot from you, and I hope you've learned a lot from me back. We spend a lot of time together thinking and planning and processing. You know, you asked some questions around how the work's being received and has there been pushback, and we spend a lot of time processing things and thinking things through and really engaging in deep planning work in advance. And then Janice, of course, takes things and completely runs with them because, to your point, she's functioning at a very high level and really working hard to meet not only individual teachers but teams where they are. And I also see my role as keeping us with a laser-like focus on those year one goals, because as Janice noted, things are coming up along the way. I will say in terms of making sure that we can measure the impact, you know, you want to speak a little to some ways that you've collected some feedback?
So I've been collecting some exit tickets from when I'm working with the educators, and they've all come back very positive. I would say that our teachers want to do this work. They're interested in it. I think it's just once we move from the fear of doing the work and we just get into it, they really zoom and fly, because the reality is that Hastings is a place where we're welcoming and we're affirming to children. And it just comes naturally to them. And sometimes they're doing things that are culturally responsive and don't even know it, right? So it's not that we don't have, it's not that we're not culturally responsive, it's that we can be even more culturally responsive. And it's really just a lens, right? We're looking at our curriculum through different lenses. You know, whose voices are silenced here? Who can we bring out more? So that's really what it's about. And I've gotten really positive feedback from, I haven't had anyone really push back on any of the work, to be honest.
I just have a really quick question. What do you anticipate the deadline is, or for having the digital toolkit prepared?
Go ahead.
Right, so we're meeting on Thursday, and I know I've already designed the digital piece of it, and the hope is that the diversity committee will come together. We'll have work sessions, and we're filling up. actually doing the research, finding information and getting that into the digital toolkit. The hope is by the end of the year, we have something in place so that by September, we were talking about kind of rolling that out to the teachers, because it has different stakeholders, so we're looking for students to be able to look at it, teachers, school leaders, so it has all of the different components to it.
Sorry, what is the digital toolkit exactly?
So digital toolkit is it's taking the information for culturally responsive sustaining education and putting resources in. So that if you're a teacher who wants to talk about welcoming and affirming environment, you click on culturally, welcoming and affirming environment, you go into the teacher section, and then there'll be resources for you.
So we may want to, are we ready to progress? Are we more questions?
No, we are, I don't know if there was something.
I was asking when would you want me to read the statement that I prepared?
Well, that's.
I could do it during the
Is it relevant to
board
this?
comments?
Otherwise, yeah, maybe board comments,
Yeah,
no?
I was going to say, thank you.
Thank you.
guys.
Good night.
Thank you for staying.
And I could do it now, it doesn't matter because it's connected to SEO, but I wanted to be mindful of the time.
You can do it now or at board comments, which would you rather do it?
I should just get it over with. Okay. So I'm going to read, it's a long board comment, but I felt like, and this is my area, so I felt like I need to share this. I'm a neurobiologist in terms of behavior. I have worked with paternal care, and recent times I shifted to what they call educational neuroscience, which is looking at the underlying mechanisms when it comes to racial and colorism, right? And some of the work that is connected to diversity. But I just want to say, I want to start by stating something that happened to me when I took the IAT test, the implicit association test, the Harvard Project Implicit. Now, this is a well-known test, and it's a way and most people don't understand the essence of this test, but it's a way for us to understand the way the brain, the neuronal basis of association, predisposition, that speaks from the way the brain is connecting to something that is more of an imagery. So then we have to remember that the IAT test has two results: a proclivity to whiteness or blackness. And blackness in itself is also a form of bias. If you have, so most people think that when you take the test and you have towards whiteness, hey, then you're racist. No, it's not about measuring your disposition. And those who have it at blackness too is also the same effects, just like towards the whiteness. So then, what I have seen sometimes is missing, and we've had separate conversations about this with different isolated individuals, is that the communication regarding IAT must be understood, which is simply this, that the neuronal associations towards whiteness or blackness does not necessarily translate to one's innermost dispositions and predispositions towards an intentional practicing of racism against blacks or white, for that matter, whichever side of the coin that you fall. So I said that I took the IAT test myself a long time ago, and it said I preferred whiteness over blackness. So my colleagues all laugh at me because I don't really like fried chicken. So they're like, yeah, we see that. And they laugh at me with that. But I wasn't surprised at all, not because you may be thinking whatever you may be thinking. I wasn't surprised because of how I understand the way the brain works, which is this. I am from a colonized country, okay? And I need people to hear this, and it's factual. Several folks, to be precise, black individuals like myself, operate with a racist mindset. Now, I want to repeat this. Black folks, just like myself, operate with what? racist mindset. And what does this racist mindset means? Now, I'm talking about my personal country. I'm not talking about US of A. I'm not representing African Americans, so to speak. But, and I'm representing my country, which is a colonized country, okay? Okay. So what does this racist mindset that black folks within this colonized country are having? This is what it means. They esteem whiteness as the standard by which they measure themselves. Okay? They esteem whiteness as the standard by which these black folks are measuring themselves. Okay? So it doesn't mean they are racist. No. They operate with what? A racist mindset by using whiteness as the standard by which they measure themselves. And yes, they are black folks. And if you don't believe me, you don't need to go to my country, go to Brazil, okay? And you will be shocked at the extent of which colorism is at display unashamedly. What I'm saying is not some hidden information. It's unashamedly with wanton lightness, light skin tone, color, which is one of the protected classes. In short, the approach, why am I saying all of this? I love Hastings, and I know, and I feel like we are the trailblazers. Like Dr. Makesi said, like we are talking about DEI, and there's no fight. People are listening, and I love, I'm so happy I'm part of the board at this time than any other time, because we want to understand, we've raised concerns, and so anyway, but I want to say that the approach to allow coexistence, which I've already mentioned, that must start from leveling this unleveled baseline that we have, that is there against marginalized groups, should not be about shaming. That is so critical, because once we start shaming, rather than understanding and striving to a solution-oriented process, the shaming just blocks everybody. So I think most of the conversations and concern has been because individuals might have felt shamed, and that's why it's good for us to go through the communication channels with Doreen and I and Alison, we are trying to work with together to allow that, stop it right there and not assume anything other than what it really is. And I'm looking forward for us finishing this work of communication. But this is the factual thing, that racist ideologies are real. They are real in this country. And this town, we are not immune to it. So we cannot stop the work. And so I say this to say that I have mentioned this one way or the other, that I am hoping that this work doesn't become the Christmas light effect. That's what I call it. The Christmas light effect is the season. Oh, I can't breathe. Let's have huge speeches here and there. And then when the season is over and it's March, please stop blinking your Christmas light. It creates irritation even at past. And this happens. Again, this is the simple way the brain is viewing a work that if it's not integrated, it becomes a Christmas light effect. And so I am actually, this is the first time I'm seeing the year plan. I didn't know it had a year plan, because I bet you, I was the last person to join the diversity committee. And I expressed it because I said, I don't know how this is going to last. A lot of groups mushroomed. Where are these groups right now? Public spirit dies. The brain synopses gone. It doesn't spark anything. And so if you're not invested, it doesn't mean anything, and the whole wave starts all over again. So I just want us to remember what happened in the Holocaust. It's no different from the ugliness of the past when it comes to slavery embedded in racially marginalized groups. Symbols such as the swastika, which I know people have had arguments with that, but it's a complete horror to the Jewish ethnic group, although it's a symbol that has a noble meaning in Buddhism and Hinduism. The K word, the K-I-K-E word, is hateful ideology that should not remain as a singular story of the ethnic group. Yes, people know about it, but the importance of integrating curriculum to bring this diversity is to steer away from singular stereotypic stories. Singular stories become stereotypes. Enough of that. I mean, how many people know about the history of even African Americans before slavery and colonization? All right, so it's like this work is beyond just people's feelings, you know, and anyway, bygones are bygones. But I have articles upon articles upon articles. I've shared some before, but persons of color, and I'm not just saying black people, okay, persons of color, non-Caucasians, often face a stereotype threat as subjective predicament on them in our society. And it's factual that they experience school difficulties stemming from these social, emotional learning disadvantage. It's factual. There is data. We don't even need to look at Hastings data, but we can look at it as well. It's factual. Okay. Now I want to delineate this further. So if there is a sustained, continuous harmful input saddled with negative emotional toll, what will ultimately take place is that this particular knowledge learned, which is what we call it, or learning of their knowledge, takes more brain power than academic information. We know public data about how African Americans don't do well. I'm from the motherland. I did not experience these juvenile mixed stuff. So it's not genetics. It's not genetics. There is a component, and research clearly shows all of these things that are totally connected. Unless the collective work addresses the root cause of the current on-level baseline that is ingrained in this is not about Hastings, this is just institutional frameworks that we have from time immemorial that we haven't yet updated, right? This is not anybody's fault. This is what my textbook was teaching me, and that is what we had, and it hasn't yet been updated. So this integration is all about what do you call it? Updating information for it to be relevant to all that it's serving. And I feel like if we go with that mindset, instead of trying to shame people, then we know that we are just doing an update of something that is archaic. And I personally, with others that I know are listening, I hope, and I'm quite certain, and I know that Dr. Makesi and the leadership team with the administrators and teachers will continue in the operational piece of this significant collective work that is going to help us move forward together. Thank you. I was hustling.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to share.
Can I just say one thing? Because we talked about it.
Yes.
This idea of how, you mentioned having something that's relevant to all. That's not sort of historicized or put on a shelf, and that's what that's what I keep coming back. What we talked about, the need for things to really, the overarching concept to be something that's humanist, right? I mean, I'm sure many of us have seen the documentary for Sama on Netflix, maybe? No? Watch that. The idea that you connect with something not because it's about Syria or not because it involves Russians or a place you don't know or people who speak a language you don't know, but because when you watch it, you recognize yourself. And it's important not because they're Syrian, but because they're human. And there's so many examples of materials and people and works of art that display that and help connect people in that way. It's not just there and gone, because I always talk about like the Waldo effect. Once you see it, you don't unsee it. And you take that with you forever. And so for me, that's the sort of richness of human experience that I'm nervous about it just being sort of represented. I think it's sort of a first principle. You can only show it, you can only reveal it, you can only experience it. And with regards to the curriculum, I want to make sure that it is there in that way that I think you value and what we've talked about as well. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me
Okay.
the listening ear.
No, I think it's great. And I think that, for me, I don't know, but like Janice, the main work that I would love is not like the courageous conversation, like having a class, but the work you're doing with the history classes and the English classes. Like, to me, that's where it becomes normalized. And it's not, like, wouldn't it be a great world when we didn't have to have a courageous conversation
Correct.
class, Like, that eventually goes away. So for me, like, that's the key. When I see, like, what you're doing, I love that stuff, and I think that that's the really important, because it's not about you're a victim and I'm an oppressor and this is it. It just becomes, like, normalized. And I heard this black guy once saying that he was like, I don't want to see any more movies about like 10 Years a Slave and all that. He's like, I just want a romantic comedy where the two leads are black and it's not like tragedy. It's just like some happy thing that's happening in their life and they happen to be black. And I think that like that work that you're doing inside the classroom, I think is really important, and where the importance lies. That's why I was so happy to hear that there wasn't any pushback from the teachers. That's why I was asking.
And I have to tell you, at my DEI meetings, everyone's looking at Hastings. Everyone on that committee turns and says, Janice, what's happening in Hastings? We are so far and beyond what everyone else is doing. They're just trying to catch up with us. And I just want us to continue taking the lead, because everybody knows us for our DEI work.
It's true. I mean, one of our regional BOCES reached out to me and said, can you please sit? And I had a conflict that particular day, but can you please sit and be a panelist? We're talking regionally about this work, and there's so much that districts can learn from each other, and everyone's in different places, right? And but just there's a lot of really good thought and really good planning that's going into the work that's happening, and it's being done with teams of teachers who are in very different places, actually. And so, making sure that we're keeping our foot firmly on the gas pedal, we're hearing everybody, we're listening, we're paying attention to what's going on outside of Hastings, and we're actually building that into the design of our work, where we can get a sense of like what's going on and what do we need to be thinking about. And so I really do, I appreciate the collaborations around this, and the very open, thoughtful, ongoing dialogue about this work, because I think that's really, really important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been an excellent conversation. Thank you, Janice and Melissa, for the work you've been doing. I know, Bill, you've been supporting as well, and thank you to the board for a great conversation as we continue to evolve down this path that we've been chatting about for many years now, Janice, so thank you.
With you at the lead. You opened the door.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Janice.
Wonderful.
I'm just going to throw in there that we found the synopses online of the curriculum and engagement, and I think if you do go there, you'll find a lot of good information about what happens in the classes.
Great.
It's actually very
Good.
comprehensive.
So that's part of our
Yeah, we
communication,
talked about it.
to make that more obvious where it is,
It
right?
took me a minute to find it. I needed help.
Jordan is
Right.
like, okay,
Right.
communication team.
Right.
Yeah,
what's
so
going on?
it's really good, so
Great.
if you could disseminate that to people.
Good. Yeah, that's
who are
great.
asking me.
That's great.
I'm really sensitive, Sabine, to you like
Oh,
being
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Thank you for staying.
We got like business stuff to go through right now, so please, if you. you go home-
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabine.
Bye.
Thank you, Sabine.
Thank you very much.
Have a great week.
Okay, so let's move on to business items. 7A, does anybody have any questions, items 1 through 6 under 7A?
And the particular item is now in here, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, item number 6
Yeah.
is the one that,
7A, right?
6.
Oh, okay.
7A, item 6.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
That was the one that, and I apologize for that, but it's here now when it counts, I guess.
Anybody have any questions about these items?
I'd just like to say, if anybody's watching on tape, the Tucker Lecture Series is a fabulous program. Robert Tucker, and a former teacher, and it's always good to see that one keep getting supported.
just to also say that that money came from donations and from fundraising, so there's something, actually, after this particular speaker, the fund will be depleted, so it would require, which we could do that, but just because I think there was a question about where that funding came from.
Good to know, thank you.
You're welcome.
And just, I don't know if it's, oh, forget it. I couldn't open one of the things. I thought the link wasn't working, but it's open now.
Do I have a motion to approve items 1 through 6 under 7A? And a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 7B. Do I have a motion to approve the placements and services for CSE and CPSE? And a second?
Second.
All in favor? Personnel, we've pulled out Ken Catrone, items 8A through D. Any questions or comments?
So you're doing A, B, C, and D?
A, B, C, and D.
I don't know either personally, but we always wish people retiring the best of luck, and we wish the AP teacher continued success as he moves, not the assistant principal, and Neil as he moves, and of course Susan as well, but I can't speak to them, but the board always appreciates.
Do a little bit of a roundup.
Yeah, for all of them as well. A through D, ready to roll.
A through D. Okay, do I have a motion to approve personnel items 8A through D.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Minutes from last board meeting, 11/22. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Or does anybody have any questions in advance? Okay, motion to approve? A second? All in favor? Okay. Good policy, second read for community use of district facilities, equipment, and labor. On this second read, does anybody have any further questions?
I should have talked about it in our board, our policy meeting, but it's just one update. Let me pull it up. I thought I had it open. There it is. Okay. So if you look at the document, teaching and learning.
We're voting to approve it as it is tonight?
No, it's the first read.
This second.
This is the second read. Oh, this is the second read?
This is the second read. We're voting to approve it.
So I wanted just to include 8D, it's colorism, because race and color are two separate things. So it says encourage academic discussions about racism and bigotry, but racism, colorism, because frankly, we have a lot of mixed race kids. And I personally think that color, non-color is another rebranding into whatever, and that's that's my personal thing, but I think that sometimes you go to a place, if I don't have a conversation with any of you, what I see is color more than race. So I think that.
Are you referring to
Yeah,
1500? Where is that?
Yeah, the DEI, sorry, the policy.
Oh,
Oh, we're not doing that.
You are not there yet?
No, just the.
That's why I thought it was the first read.
No, it was
It's the district facilities
spaces.
policy.
Oh, gosh, I'm
Yeah.
opening the wrong thing. I'm so
No,
sorry.
So where's that policy though? Is that policy?
That's
it's not
still in
on yet?
committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Sure, I
okay.
didn't miss it.
So this, okay, I'm so sorry.
Okay, That's okay. So 1500, does anyone have any comments on that before we approve the update? Do I have a motion to approve policy 1500 as it exists here on board docs?
So
A second? All in favor? Okay, second public comment, going once, going twice. Got an email.
Got a hit?
It's so exciting. There's life out there.
What was our take? That comment policy has changed so many times over
It
COVID.
can be off topic or off the
Just
agenda.
let them read it and find out.
It's second, right, yeah.
No, it wasn't.
Do you not want to do it?
Well, I just don't want to open Pandora's box here, but
We'll make
let's
a
go.
policy to,
Let's
This
make
one
a
has to
policy.
do with,
Make it
this
only
one
the
has
first
to do with
10.
the agenda tonight, you must be watching.
You know, it's fine. I think we got caught, just to clarify where my head is right now, I think we got caught between, we had public comments in public, and then we went to Zoom. Now we're in this hybrid environment
Yeah,
where
you're
we've
right.
never quite figured out
if
how to
we're
do
going to do
this.
public comments on write-ins.
Well, what I'm wanting to avoid, so we're all clear, is that we don't receive like 40 write-ins during meetings that we then have to end up reading. So that's why I don't want to open this box right now. Okay, so if that person has a public comment, they need to,
I
You mean
think, I
have
think
it
last
live
time
before
we
the
did
meeting?
it. Last
was
time
nothing.
Melissa read it.
no,
Doug, let me ask a question then while you're thinking about it.
yeah.
Is this, if we wanted to establish a policy, is this something that we could do at the next meeting? We just say what our new policy will be?
We can all
I mean,
talk
what we
about it
do
and say
tonight,
that's it, yeah.
what we do tonight, we can undo by
Exactly.
January in
So-
a new policy?
Yeah, I mean, you're silent,
We can, I'm just.
Okay, so let's
we
read-
talked
Yeah,
about
I think
I would
precedent.
recommend we read this one
I
and then
think
we
so.
discuss whether or not we want to limit it to the first 10 people that email in and no more than a page.
Okay, to
before.
Doug's point, just before the meeting.
No, we could discuss whether we want to have a no comment read or, you know, we could
Yeah.
put limits to it like we
Or
did.
or
to
the
our
comments
I
have
agree.
to come in
Before.
24 hours in advance or
Correct,
something.
something
Something like that, but I
Yeah.
don't think reading this one will set
This
us down a
one, yeah.
precedent
Okay.
if we're able
So
to
we're-
undo it.
So that
for
we're
the
all on
meeting.
the same page here, I just want to be clear, okay?
Good, this is not precedent setting.
Okay,
Correct.
This is
Yeah, I
not
agree.
precedent setting for the record.
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you
Thank you.
for bringing that up.
Well, you also, you have the right to this may be allowed. It's basically.
Maybe we
It's
have
maybe
the right,
allowed,
So it's
because
under your
we have to
discretion.
decide.
but we want to
later,
have it so
but,
that it's
yeah.
not just up for
Yeah.
discretion in the future.
Okay.
What's your best
One
choice?
public comment.
It looks very long.
No, it's not. It's from Jennifer Ito. She wrote in and said she was a bit disturbed to see the SEL survey results from the Asian students and in grades 6 through 12 and, put in quotations the results there. And asked if there are plans to specifically address this cohort of students, especially in light of the goals under the CRSE framework, and investigate further what is going on with this group. And then she just said, thank you for the very enlightening assessment of our students.
Thank you.
Okay, Board of Education comments.
I have a question more. So in terms of this decision to see how to get public comment when we can have people are working, they can't come in here, we are doing this hybrid thing, is it,
Those two different things. Working and hybrid is two different things. but-
okay, yes, you're right, 100% right. But the decision about public comment, is it something that we have to discuss
In public.
in public? Yes. So it means it's something we have to put on the agenda for the public to know we are discussing it and discuss it and make the decision, correct? Okay.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
You could ask your policy committee to look at it, because.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably better done in the policy committee, so.
Again, I was getting to that. That's what I was trying to get to. That's why I asked you.
Let's just,
Okay.
let's, maybe you can put that on your next agenda for the next policy committee meeting. Just to be clear on, we never used to take any outside comments. You had to come to a meeting, right? That was the whole point of public governance and being in a public sphere. So that there weren't voices coming in from places people couldn't see. And then Zoom happened, but you could still see everyone's face. And so, you could raise your hand in the Zoom meeting or send it in the Zoom meeting, and everyone was there, you could see their face. Now we've got
Cameras
this-
were off on a lot of our comments.
What's that?
Cameras could be off.
Well, yeah, but for the most part, I think the vast majority of people, 98% of people last year, the camera was on and they were making a comment. it was a weird thing you're making fun of.
Yeah.
Now we're in this environment where
Yeah.
people don't want to show up, but we could not, the faces aren't here, so the concern is that, you know, you get a meeting where, one of those meetings where it's got the entrance to 200 people in town, those show up once every year, every other year, and we end up getting 56 emails during the meeting. What do we do?
Okay.
That's the concern.
So I think that I would just say for the sake of equity, where we cannot expect that, like, again, we are, there's a lot of, the world is advancing. Senate meetings are being done in a way that, but like, I know that every public comment you must state your name and address where you live and stuff like that. So I think that if we think through, it's a great idea that the policy committee can think through it, but we may have to put certain criteria in place that will not just be an email, let me just shoot an
Yeah,
email,
well, you're-
that would enforce.
Great set of
I
things.
mean, you're currently silent on allowing emails.
Yeah.
I've just been, and, I mean, what you now have up is that they have to, that given you're doing your business in public, the comments have to be present in public.
In public, well,
So I think you can go back and look at that in the policy committee.
Yeah, and even the communication committee too, because if, then you must post your comment publicly on a site that everybody can see, because so we have to think it through, but we can't say that we can just 100% go back to the past, because again, there are people that, kids are working, like they are economically not able to just come and sit here because they have to put food on the table. And that's a reality
It's also
for
important to
them.
acknowledge that anyone can write to the board at any time.
Okay, so
also,
good.
right? So
Exactly.
it's not, and so
Right,
a
I
lot
think
of
the
people
only
like-
distinction here is that said board comment, but traditionally, because we reverted to being in person, the board policy that we have regarding comment presumes that people are coming in person. And that was suspended because obviously the state suspended the fact that none of us could have in-person meetings. And that's why we had to incorporate, you know, having these meetings virtually, and that's why people could make their comments virtually. However, now that we made you know, and the decision was up to us to come back to in-person, other districts have decided not to go that. We are making the decision to meet here, and we also have then the expectation per our standing, you know, board comment policy that people will come in person, and some people have. So I think that while somebody might send us an email that says board comment, I don't know that we necessarily have to read it out and treat it as a board comment, because basically every email.
That concerns me.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the distinction is between a board comment and an email that we get, because why does that person, just because they
So
called it
that's-
board comment and
Yeah.
somebody else who sent us something that they think probably is, you know, germane to the whole, then should their emails be read out loud? I mean,
I understand, but that's why I'm saying that we have to think exactly, because we
Right,
have to
but I'm
create
saying-
this space. that
I'm just
doesn't
saying, as
require
the policy is
in-person.
now, they would have to be here in person.
Yeah, but not everyone can make it. And we cannot, we have to accommodate everybody, because only some few voices were shaping the school, and that was a concern. That's why some of us stepped forward.
Yeah, so think through think through all those pros and cons, and let's have a conversation. Okay, I think I said more comments, or motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.